We're here to give credibility to this episode because me and Aaron are going to talk from the perspective of like newbies entering the game.
Dungeons and Dragons is what's called a tabletop role-play game. Dungeons and Dragons is the players are the ones that determine what the story becomes.
I don't need your sarcasm right now. We're trying to focus. You are the dungeon master for our campaign that we're doing in celebration of both our 100th episode, but then also the podcast being around for 1 year. Welcome to Backseat Directing.
We talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Aaron.
And we post new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're doing an intro to D&D.
3, 2, 1, action.
I don't know what to hum with you.
It's our theme song.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Bum, 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 bum.
You'll get there.
You'll learn. You'll learn. Andrew, today we have a very special guest joining us for the second or third time, depending on when all these things come out. She's been on the show a few times. She's a director, a writer, an actress, and a dungeon master. Kaylee.
Welcome to our D&D aficionado. We're here to give credibility to this episode because me and Aaron are going to talk from the perspective of like newbies entering the game, because hopefully to relate to people clicking on this because they've never played before or want to get some more insight. And then you are like our primary source.
Yeah. You are our master
expert.
Yoda.
Yeah.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Oh.
There's a lot of trying in D&D.
Yeah.
There's a lot of do notting.
So basically, the way that this all came about is that you are the dungeon master for our campaign that we're doing in celebration of both our 100th episode, but then also the podcast being around for 1 year. That's in 2 weeks from today.
Dang, that's awesome, man.
So that is a pretty big production that we're putting together. We've recorded half of it, and we're recording the rest of it this next weekend coming up. It'll probably take me a month or so to edit it all out and kind of get it all together and ready to be viewed. But it wouldn't have been possible without you. Like, Andrew and I knew very little about D&D, if anything at all, going into this campaign. And I have to say that I had a lot of fun 2 weeks ago when we recorded our first portion of our campaign. Mm-hmm. And I'm very excited to do this episode to like learn more, to see more of like behind the scenes of like how to set up a game, how to create a character, and just kind of learning more. And I think it'll also be a unique perspective having Andrew and I on here, literally not knowing anything, you know, and like being able to maybe ask the questions that new players would have.
Yeah, you kind of like literally guided us through it. Like we were like children learning to walk, and like you were like, we literally could not have walked without your guidance. So I think with all that in mind, like the first question I want to ask you for people who are clicking on this video would be to kind of explain what D&D is. Like imagining you're talking to somebody who maybe they've only seen Stranger Things, maybe they've literally never heard of what Dungeons and Dragons is, which is what D&D stands for. Can you kind of explain in a cursory way what it is?
Mm-hmm. So on kind of just a gameplay level, Dungeons and Dragons is what's called a tabletop role-play game. So it's very collaborative. Generally, when you're playing D&D as, you know, the quote-unquote board game or tabletop game, you have to have like 2 or more people. You can have the most fun I find is when you have one dungeon master or game master and 3 to 6 players. On kind of the more intrinsic like gameplay level, the way kind of I would describe it or kind of give you guys an insight to what it is I would, you know, tell you that pretend or imagine that you are two guys in the world of Lord of the Rings. So you guys, you know those movies, you know, like Aragorn was a ranger. So that's generally like he fights with swords, with bows. He's good at tracking and hunting things. So I would tell you that your rangers, like Aragorn, you walk into a tavern, into a bar, into an inn or something. You sit down to kind of have a meal, a soup and a beer. And as you're sitting there, you see across the way as kind of a shout goes up in the inn, and you turn to see somebody has stolen a young man's coin purse. And the thief turns on the young man who is confronting him and pulls out a knife or a sword. And what I would ask you is, being rangers that you are, peacekeepers, how do you handle this situation?
And then we'd kind of just come up with our own improvisational response. And so my question to you is, how would we as players know what's happening in the inn? How would we know the shape of the building or what another person across the room is doing?
So generally, one of two ways. Generally, these two ways kind of will work hand in hand. Most of the time when you're playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to have a map, whether it's on your computer, on Foundry, like Forge VTT, Roll20, or some other website, and something along those lines, or you will have a map kind of in real time if you're playing in person in front of you on the table with all of your tokens and kind of whether it's drawn out or you have an actual mini of a tavern without the roof. That like you can look inside of.
That seems like
Next level.
Yeah, the best way to play the game.
That's called the expensive level.
Gotta pay to play, baby.
So you would have that and kind of things would be moving around, but there would also be the side of, as the dungeon master, when I say that, okay, you guys walk into this tavern, you notice that there are kind of wooden rafters following the length of the room in along the ceiling, kind of over the main kind of central part of the room with beams coming down. There's a bit of a musty scent within here, kind of like a drunk fog kind of just over the room with people sitting at a bar that's kind of, as you walk into your left, tables peppering the floor ahead of you and to your right, and you notice kind of across the way to your left across from the bar an empty table. It's fairly packed tonight. You see a number of people walking around. The servers seem to be incredibly busy, but there is a spot that you could take up for yourselves.
So she's making all this up, by the way. If you're just listening, or if you're like, there's no notes right here and she doesn't have a laptop. So can you just kind of tell the audience, like, from your perspective, and this kind of also qualifies everything you're saying too, what's like your experience with D&D / your experience with being a DM or dungeon master, and like maybe how many campaigns have you done? What is that role? What do you do in that role?
So I've been playing since late 2019 before COVID hit, but I really started playing once COVID hit. Kind of playing online is the big thing nowadays, because getting a group of 5 or 6 people together who have schedules that line up can be really tough.
That's been the hardest thing with our D&D campaign, is
lining schedules
getting everyone's schedule. I mean, there's 6 of us, so we have 5 players, and then you as the DM is the 6th person. Like, that's been the hardest part, is just scheduling everyone. Like, hey, we need time, 1, to go over all the rules, 2, set up all our characters, make sure we're doing that properly, and then 3, to actually play.
Yeah.
And these games are kind of long and in depth, right?
Oh yeah. Generally, so when you play a D&D game, if you're playing a one-shot, games can range from 4 to 8 hours. I've heard of 11 game hours. I have friends who've played 11 game hours.
So what is a one shot?
So a one shot is when your DM comes up with a game and it's a game that you can play in one sitting, versus you'll hear about people playing in a campaign, which generally those will go on for years.
Yeah.
So that's like what Donald Trump does and stuff, right? Like does the campaigns.
Generally, if you've heard of groups like Critical Role or Dimension 20, even Corridor Crew as a film kind of channel on YouTube, they play what are called campaigns. So Critical Role has played in 2 campaigns. They're currently playing a 3rd, and those have over 100 episodes each.
Yeah, the way I think
a long
of it
time.
is kind of like a one shot is like a movie. It's like one storyline kind of
Yes.
thing. Like you kind of consume it all at once, and you come to an end, you know, relatively quickly. And then a campaign is like an ongoing TV series that
is like-
lasts
It's a-
seasons and seasons or whatever.
Kind of a perfect segue into something that we wanted to mention, which is the D&D movies and shows, which you can watch if you want to kind of like get some subtext for the D&D world. So there's now 4 movies. The original 3 were, the first one was just titled D&D, and I don't think all of these are connected, but the original one was just called D&D, then D&D Wrath of the Dragon God, then D&D 3 The Book of the Vile Darkness, and then the only one that has Kaylee's stamp of approval, I believe, which is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves that just came out.
Don't watch any of the other ones. Just Honor Among Thieves. Just that one.
And then
The other ones are so bad.
And then there's also the TV series, at least one that I know of, called Vox Machina, which is loosely based right on the campaign from Critical Role.
So, Legends of Vox Machina is based on Critical Role's first campaign, which feature voice actors like Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, Sam Riegel, Matthew Mercer, who is the Dungeon Master. Matthew Mercer has voiced characters such as who's the cowboy in Overwatch?
Oh God, I know it, but I don't know it.
So they've all voiced like Travis Willingham has voiced Thor in a number of the Marvel TV shows, and Laura Bailey has done Black Widow in a number of those TV shows. She's also been in The Last of Us as a voice actress. So Ashley Johnson, who plays the girl from Ellie from The Last of Us, she plays in that campaign. In Legends of Vox Machina, she plays the character named Pike. So she's a little gnome cleric, a dope little murderous, happy-go-lucky, faithful blonde girl. She died once, but she's okay now.
Ashley Johnson's my hero. Love her to death.
So, Legends of Vox Machina, there are a number of other like really popular TV shows from like the 1980s, 1990s. One of which was kind of referenced loosely in the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie. You'll notice those characters like in the maze scene, the ones who look like they're dressed from the 1980s with the cheesy like cloak and wizard hat. But that's a number of stuff. Like D&D has kind of been everywhere. I mean, they have video games. They have a stupidly popular video game coming out in like 4 days called Baldur's Gate 3. And it's a massive undertaking. It's open world with a plot that's kind of like, you know, in The Last of Us, how they have those cutaway scenes.
Yeah. And it's huge in Stranger Things. So there's like a lot of avenues
Yes.
where you could get like an introductory.
Yeah, the thing about like where it was in Stranger Things is kind of like a historical background to Dungeons and Dragons is when it first came out, it was very much a dungeon delve type of game. There wasn't, you know, it wasn't really following a story. It wasn't, you know, getting, you know, kind of loving your characters. It was creating something to hit something to get to the center of a dangerous place to defeat the bad guy and get the loot.
I actually have some behind the, you know, some early history of D&D if you guys want to hear it.
Sure.
Yes, this is our segment that we like to call Source Code, where we go over the original material of whatever we're talking about. In this case, D&D.
So D&D is originally actually based off of a game called Chainmail, and it was originally created by American game designers Ernest Gary Gygax and David Arneson. And it was originally published by Tactical Studies Rules, Inc., or TSR, in 1974. So this game's history goes back almost, 50 years? In a year, I think it'll be 50 years.
Yeah,
My quick math is correct, which is pretty impressive. Eventually, it changed hands from Tactical Studies Rules. I think in the 2000s, changed hands to what? The West Coast?
Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast.
Wizards of the Coast, yeah. But Dungeons and Dragons, originally published in 1974, it's kind of evolved a lot since then. It originally came in like a cardboard box with these different stories titled Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasure, and Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. And then it kind of evolved into like a more complicated game where there was 2 different facets. You could play advanced D&D or you could play like the more casual D&D. The advanced D&D is where they started to come out with like these books that Kaylee's brought today, the Player's Guide Handbook. There's a Dungeon Master's Handbook. There's a Monster Manual where they've got like hundreds of different monsters. So the game's expanded greatly. They started with a few classes, but over time they've just added more and more to now there's dozens of classes.
Around like 10. I think.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of something else.
Races. There are.
Races. Okay. Yeah.
So many races.
Do you have anything else for the source code?
No, you're good.
Okay, so all of this sounds overwhelming, as like a new player getting into this, like there's races, there's all this gameplay, there's advanced gameplay, you're telling me a short game could be 11 hours long, like
No. This is a long game. Or, well, a one shot.
A long one shot.
Yeah. But even like 6 hours, like our campaign, like that's a big investment. Like, how does someone get started into D&D? And also, like, kind of tying it back to our earlier question of like how you got started. Like, how did you transition into being a dungeon master? Like, how does someone get into this?
Yeah. So I was kind of I had no idea what it was when I had a friend, she said, "Hey, I'm listening to this awesome podcast by this group called Critical Role. I think it's something you'd really like because, super into fantasy. I love storytelling and stuff like that." And the way that she kind of pitched it to me was, there's this character in this podcast, and he has like he's not wise whatsoever, like intelligence whatsoever, but he has this stupid wisdom, like stupid high wisdom, and so like he says the smartest stuff, but in the dumbest way. And so like that caught my attention immediately, and then she showed me a website called D&D Beyond, which is kind of the world's leading Dungeons and Dragons website. Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast just bought them earlier this year.
It's the D&D gateway drug.
Yes. So generally, like, getting into D&D is knowing somebody who can tell you about it, or like hearing about it and looking into it. Because there are a lot of YouTubers who all they do is talk about D&D. They're the campaigns that you can watch, Critical Role, Dimension 20, that they play through and you learn as you watch. And then going from player to DM, really it's just an interest in wanting to storytell. So you can start out by picking up a module, which is kind of a pre-written game. Those will generally run a couple sessions, not a full campaign, but not a one shot either. And kind of you read through it, it outlines everything for you that you need to be able to run it. All of the details, all of the options, all of the locations, the NPCs, what they can buy, what'll happen if they do A, B, and C. And kind of going from there, and what you can do after that is you can start either a campaign module, which would include something like Icewind Dale is something that came out not long ago. That's the name of a module that takes place in Faerun, which is kind of the current location for D&D 5e. And you can take something from there, or you can create your own world, create your own, gods in that world, your own locations, your own NPCs, and essentially write it out like a book or a movie, but allowing there to be space for the players to fill in the story. Because, Dungeons and Dragons is... the players are the ones that determine what the story becomes. You're just the one who kind of writes the outline for it and then go from there.
That's what made me so excited about getting into this in the first place, was when we were first talking about it, it seemed like this was a game of storytelling. And that's, of course, something that I love, right? Creating things to tell a story that other people can enjoy as well. And it seems like the DM is like kind of the writer, and then we are the actors who are like ad-libbing the stuff that we're doing, and it's like a collaborative storytelling effort between the whole group.
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
improv. What I feel like really drew me to it was just like the fact that obviously we love escapism, right? Like that's what this whole podcast is talking about escapism. But in this sense, I feel like it really connects you like with your inner child. Because of like the inherent requirement for imagination.
Yeah,
like,
you get to pretend
it's something
that you're
it's
someone else in a different world, and you're playing with other people, which is really cool.
role
Yeah.
playing or imagination to that scale. I feel like is something that you really lose hold of as an adult, and like anything, I feel like if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to get back into that. Like when we were playing, like it's Because when we're playing, we're trying to play as the character, not as ourselves.
Yeah.
Which takes some adjusting.
Right. So like if you would typically do something, doesn't mean that's the way that you should do it, because maybe your character won't do that.
Exactly.
So you have to try to really stay true to the character that you have written in collaboration with the DM, which has been a lot of fun for us to explore in our campaign.
Yeah, there have been times in the past where I've been playing in a game, and I had a character in a game that I'm currently playing. She had a 5 charisma, which, for anybody wondering, 10 is the average. Anything below 10 means that you're probably going to be royally screwed when you have to roll for that, ability. You roll a dice that has 20 sides. The number you roll on, you either add or subtract a certain modifier based on the number that you have. A 5 means you subtract 3, which is a big number to subtract. And so, when I would play her, I had to play her as like this. I naturally kind of am good at talking or knowing when to or when not to say things. But playing her, I had to throw that out the window and say the most absurd stuff. Everything that came to my mind first. I offended a lot of characters and NPCs playing that person. It was a lot of fun.
And that's what makes it fun. Yeah, exactly. Because you're like, you're someone else, and like if you get a group of people who are all invested in like being their character, like it could add a whole new dynamic to not only the game, but also to like your friendship,
Yeah.
And I feel it being kind of something that you and your group will like go back to and talk about, like remember when we did this, or remember when like you did this, but it wasn't you were playing as a character. Like it was so cool, funny, like your character's dumb, but it's like you're not dumb, you're playing a character, which is really cool.
It's really funny because
not to hurt your feelings, Andrew, you're not dumb, it's your character.
Yeah, I had this is kind of Easter egg for our upcoming release of our video that we filmed the first half of our campaign already, but my character Plasma has like some contention with Corey's character Flashfire, and we went to a party immediately after filming it, and I was like, hey, like no hard feelings, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the funny part about like after playing so long, after you finish a game, it's like you talk to your friends about it, and you're like, it was so funny when you said that to him, and it's like you don't speak as though you're differentiating anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, no, you did that. It was great.
Yeah.
But like it's so much fun. In another game I'm playing, one of the characters is slightly like, he does not like the race of people that my character is from because they were really bad people, just kind of overall. And so like he will say the most absurd stuff, or like he'll be like, I can't believe I have to heal a filthy blah, blah, blah. And it's really funny because like in character, like, oh, ow. But out of character, you're like, that's the funniest thing you could possibly say in this moment.
Man.
So it's a lot of fun. And the more that you play, the more you learn. And it's bizarre how much that you can just retain playing this game. Like I was teaching like you guys how to play, and there was stuff that I would like forget to mention because I've been playing for like, almost 5 years.
Yeah, used to other players knowing.
Yeah, so it was like I had to like slow down, and I'd be like, okay, wait, okay. So we're going to go over the sheet all together, and we're going to go over this and then this and then this, and then I'm going to go individually all around and be like, answering questions and stuff. And then I'd say something that I'm like, to me sounds like really normal. And then I'd get a question of like, what does that mean? I'd be like, oh, right.
Yeah.
So do you think, now that we're talking about our sheets, do you think that'd be a good time to get into discussing like building a character and what the different stats mean and how they apply, and then what you and me felt like when we were creating ours for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. But before we do that, I want to say like the time commitment that you put into like putting on our campaign, and the way that you like structured the story, and like how you handled us like going through this game without really knowing what we're doing, but kind of figuring it out as we went along, like you did awesome. Like you crushed it. Like you made this game a lot of fun for us. And I hope like the audience watching also has that fun, and can experience maybe something new that they aren't used to, or if they are experienced in D&D, they also had fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And literally all of that is because of you.
I think you did just okay, but I definitely think you tried your best.
I think I'm proud of the table as a whole and everyone that was playing, because you guys, I mean, you picked it up faster than, so much faster than other people that I have taught before. And playing, like, generally when you're playing with new people, it's slow and it doesn't move very well and it's very stutter stepped. But and I threw you guys in at a high level where you had a lot to consider.
What, level 6?
Level 6. Out of 20 levels, normally it takes a number of sessions. Like my current campaign that I'm running right now, they're currently level 6. We've been level 6 for like 4 months.
Jeez.
So,
You treated hardcore.
I
we've
also
been playing
do.
for 3 years.
I did feel like we were, or I was drowning in options over here. Didn't overly know what I could do at certain
I
moments.
think you did a good job of like balancing what you could handle though at like the same time.
Well, I felt like as the game went on and we like kind of played our turn and like got into our second turn and all that stuff, like after I made a turn, I realized like, oh, like I could have actually done this. Like that would have been maybe more accurate for my character. But then also like I didn't see that I had this option until I was like reworking of like how I could have done that better. And like it kind of forces you to learn quick, because you're like, I want to be able to do a big impact in the game.
Yeah.
But then I think in terms of like us learning it fast, like you said, I think having the pressure of it like being recorded and it being a production like kind of helped elevate all of our like commitment to the game, you know?
You
Because
didn't want to stop and ask questions the whole time when you had to move.
because we're putting on a show, so like we have to like kind of keep rolling, like we can't just stop and talk about something.
Kind of like the same thing that we did with the show in general when we started the show, I think is a good like advice that I would give with my little experience to like a new player is like get into it and focus on having fun. Don't focus on doing it perfect. Because like you're talking about in combat, I was like, man, I could have used Bane or Hunter's Mark here and I didn't use it at the beginning of the fight, never ended up using it. But I mean, my character, I was more focused on my character. My character was like rush into everything recklessly, and that's what I did. And I had a lot of fun and ended up being very happy with how my turns played out. So like, don't optimize everything. Don't try to be perfect. Like focus on having a good time first. And that's the same advice I give to anybody that like wants to start something new. If it's comics or D&D or whatever, do what makes you happy.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to, because like you guys are saying some stuff that's like, it's honestly more relatable across the board than I think like you or like new or anybody realizes. Like I've been playing for 5 years. I still make mistakes like that, or I realize things after my turn where I was like, I've been playing this character for like 6 months and I forgot that I could do that and I should have done that. And it was like, I'll just have to remember that next time.
Because combat's like a flurry, right?
Oh
Like,
my
it's like-
gosh.
And we're about to go on playing our character for the second time.
Exactly. I feel like you guys are doing a really great job of like, taking in that information and making those decisions, especially because in combat, everything changes every turn. Like, somebody could die. You had this whole plot or like thing planned out that you were going to do. Suddenly that enemy's dead, leaving this one over here, and your friend's in another enemy's like mouth at that point in time. And so you're like,
friend.
So you're like, gosh, dang it, there goes my plan, and I'm up next, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? So it's a thing, it's a time.
Yeah, my advice to someone who's new to D&D and wants to get into it is, if it's something that you're interested in, consume content of other people playing.
Yes.
Like that helped me out a lot. I know Andrew watched a bunch of episodes, of people playing. Like it gives you an idea of the flow, and the possibilities. And you kind of pick up on little things, and maybe you don't understand it as it's happening, as they're doing it, but it kind of comes back to you as you are playing, and like rely on your DM. They're there to help you and to help progress the story forward. Like they're not going to just leave you in the dust, so like.
Yeah. Most of the time you won't be on camera when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. So you have plenty of time to ask those questions and to take your time and to like, read what you have and like survey what's going on, and you can ask a bajillion questions. Like the players I told you about, we've been playing for 3 years, they still ask a bajillion questions. And it's like, we take time for that. And it's like, especially as a new player, it's important that you take the time to be able to learn.
All right, now let's get into our character sheet. So, Kaylee, as the resident expert, can you kind of talk about what goes on? All hail, Spirit of Sancti. Can you talk about what goes into a character sheet? Like, what's maybe like the highlights, the most important things?
So the character sheet is kind of the mechanical reference to be able to play the game with the person you've created. The most important part about the character sheet is the actual character. The creating a character, first and foremost, at least in this day and age of D&D, is about creating, somebody that you can step into the shoes of, understand and play well. It's someone that, you can relate to. Generally, when you create a D&D character, whether intentionally or unintentionally, generally the problems that you give them are semi-reflective of your problems in real life.
Andrew, is that true?
Am I gonna have to delve into my own personal psyche after the?
It's really.
This is a safe place.
Like example.
You are loved.
Just a short example. The character I'm currently playing in that campaign that I mentioned about, like the person with the one that doesn't like me. I've had to really ask myself, okay, what is going on for her mentally? Because I've been having a hard time connecting to her. And so I was talking through it with one of my friends, and they are a psychology major. So I gave them kind of the breakdown of what she's going through
Conversation
mentally.
ended with Kaylee crying, feeling released.
Ran Kaylee's pockets. All right, just turn. You know that thing where they turn around the iPad and there's like a tip thing on there.
And so like they kind of broke down like basically everything I gave them into, well, it sounds like kind of this is what they'd be feeling at this point in time, and this is kind of the situation as it stands in relation to their backstory. And then as I looked at that and I wrote down how they would react to it, I was like, wait, why is that literally me right now? Okay.
So what does it mean about me that I wrote a character that's ironically self-sacrificial despite hating everybody?
I don't think you could have described yourself any better.
So like it's about creating a character that you'll enjoy playing, like on the RP role play side of things. RP means role play when I refer to that. But as well, there comes the mechanical side of things where you want to build a character on like the side of race, class, subclass that like, they're going to be additive to the campaign and the party. Because if they're not doing much, you're going to find that you're not having much fun playing them on that side of things. Because you can be really connected to a character emotionally, personally, but like hate playing them because you built them so awfully. Mm-hmm. I have been there. It sucks. So
basically, like
it's a learning curve.
The character
Exactly.
you build can have like long-term repercussions for you as you play, because the person you build is gonna affect how you play, the decisions you make, and your roles.
Exactly.
Your likelihood for success.
Yeah. Yes. So like a character I'm playing in another campaign currently, I built her as a fighter sorcerer, which are 2 classes, so I multi-classed her. And her combination of those 2 classes plus how I divvied out her ability scores did not work whatsoever. She was very unhelpful. I did not like how she played. It was I retired her for a temporary period of time so that the DM could allow me to rebuild and rework how I built her.
Sounds like Corey's character.
Corey's character's trash. Trash fire, dead weight. So
like when you take those aspects and you translate them mechanically, that's where you get the character sheet, and there's where you have all of the numbers and all of the things that you have to be able to reference to actually play the game. There are 2 things that you need to play D&D: dice and a character sheet. You don't need a map. You don't need
imagination.
I guess 3 things. And so like the character sheet, you roll up the numbers, you add the modifiers and everything. You write out, what your abilities are.
Can we break down a character sheet a little more? Like,
Here, I have one. Mine pulled up right here if you want to look at it.
Like-
So while you take a look at that, I want to kind of talk about my perspective of building a character for the first time.
Yeah.
In the most general sense, what I wanted to say was I saw it in like
sorry,
this Butterfingers over here, this whole episode.
that's my bad. That's my bad.
But I saw creating my character in two avenues, right? There's like creating the character the way you would write a character in a book. And then there's creating a character, the more mechanical sense that Kaylee's talking about earlier. And I had a lot of fun creating my character the way you would in a book. I wrote my character a backstory. I gave my characters flaws, goals, personality traits.
Not only was it backstory, you came up with their first issue and their comic release.
Yeah, my origin.
Andrew was all in, and it was really cool.
I got into that and had a lot of fun with that. The area that was like more monotonous to me, but still very necessary to the game was the numbers. Like when you get into the sheet, you have to give your character, their stats are made up from like these numbers in different columns. So Kaylee's probably about to go over like strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and then you've got all these other like skills, modifiers, whatever you want to call them, that branch off from there. You have to come up with that. You have to write down your character's spells. You have to write down your character's weapons. You have to write down your character's features and traits, which are kind of like abilities. So that area is a lot more. You're copying, pasting from D&D handbooks, from online. You're getting stuff from D&D Beyond.
That DM.
Yeah, and having, that's where I think one of the most important things is to this is literally picking a good DM. Pick somebody who's experienced and somebody who is like kind and patient with you, because having a good DM really saved us in this. Like you'll have so many questions if it's your first time playing, and it is very confusing filling out your character sheet. So like having that guiding hand, like I said, teaching us to walk, like that made the monotonous point possible. Like that was made us understand the game. And then like the other, it's all happy-go-lucky and fun to just imagine a character. And like if you like imagining things, like the role-playing aspect is fun, but the game has to be rooted in these numbers in order for it to be a game, and not us all just like walking around with conflicting imaginations of what's happening, like that episode of South Park where he's like, I have the power to have all powers. Like the rules ground the game, so you need that.
Piggybacking off of that, like going into the campaign, I had a lot of questions still, but the whole time I had faith that it's all going to work out because Kaylee knows what she's doing, and we're just going to have fun with it, and like if I mess up as a player, it's okay because your character messes up. Like that's just part of being human. And even if that wasn't the way you exactly wanted to tell the story, it's fun to figure out how to continue the story, even though you maybe made a mistake.
Yeah, if your DM is chastising you or seems upset that you made a decision maybe they didn't want you to make, they didn't have in mind, or that, I feel like that's a no-no. Like it's their
flag.
Yeah, it's
big red flags.
Maybe look for somebody else, because like it's their job to respond to your decisions. And like Kaylee was doing earlier when she's just imagining like a tavern, like DMs are talented people. Like it definitely takes some time playing the game and like a good imagination to play that role. That's who you want.
So Kaylee, we're looking at a character sheet right now. Like, what are the steps? What do we fill out first? What does everything mean?
Okay, so kind of looking at your character sheet, the first thing in order, like in the order of building a character mechanically, generally the first thing you'll do is you'll pick out the race that you're playing. So like in the player's handbook, there are a number of like original races, which includes like a halfling, a human, a tiefling, a half orc, an elf, a half elf, a dwarf. Did I say gnome? They're gnomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the amazing. The amazing race.
The amazing race. So there are a number of.
This is already complicated, Andrew.
So like
I don't need your sarcasm right now. We're trying to focus.
So like there.
Shut up. This is Kaylee's time to talk.
I think not Hispanic or Latino was one of them.
So there are a number of races that you can pick from, and
Just me and you, Kaylee. Ignore him.
there are a number of them. Each race that you pick is going to have a different effect on like what you can do in the game. So like I told you that the longer you play, the more absurd the amount of information that you retain is. I could list you every reason that you would want to play a human or a variant human versus an elf. So like an elf has what's called dark vision versus a human does not. If you play a variant human, you can take at the beginning, at your very first level, what's called a feat, which gives you like an extra special ability, basically. Elves have like weapon training. They have something called trance. They can't easily be charmed by spells.
Don't humans also get like +1 to each of their stats at the
So
beginning?
each class can have +1, +1, +1 across their stats, or +2 and +1. That rule did change after a certain book came out a couple years ago called Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Generally, in the past, it's been the race that you chose. It was a specific plus number to, say, like if you played a half orc, it would be +2 to strength and +1 to constitution or an ability score of your choice. Or if you played an elf, it would be +2 to something and +1 to something else. And it all depended on the race you picked. But now D&D has become a little bit more open and kind of like malleable. So you can build a character that you really want to play with the certain class that you want to play.
Yeah, speaking of D&D rule changes, one of the things I was reading was that when hands kind of switched over in 2000s from TSR to Wizards of the Coast, I think they kind of started around there with maybe the 3rd edition it was. And it seems like the consensus was that with the 4th and 5th editions, they've been making changes based on what players have been asking for. And like, do you feel like the game's been improving due to that?
3E was good. We don't talk about 4E, and then 5E's been great.
It seems like they're trying, I guess.
And then they're currently in the process of creating their newest and final edition of D&D, at least from Wizards of the Coast, called D&D 1. There are a number of things that we like and a number of things that we don't like. But the great thing about D&D is you can choose which rules you want to play with and which rules you don't want to play with. So it's everything that they have changed. It's been very malleable for the players and specifically the DMs, because, you know, the DM is the one that sets the rules at the table, for like how you want to be able to play.
Yeah. But for me, just looking at the character sheet, getting back to the character sheet, like there's so many different things that can be on here, from like what's in your pack, how fast you can move, you might have immunity to certain diseases, you might have like certain armor. But since this is just intro to D&D, can you kind of just give an example, maybe through like a hypothetical situation of how it works with stats and dice rolls?
Yeah. So generally, once you've picked your race and your class, which determines what like actual abilities you have, if you're a spellcaster or just kind of like a melee person, you would get to your abilities. That's the 3rd step of the process. So generally, there are a few ways to roll up your ability scores. So there are 6 ability scores. There is strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Each of these things is kind of like an aspect of your character. In real life, we all have these kinds of aspects. We all have a level of strength, a level of like what we can lift. Dexterity is like, okay, are you super clumsy or not? Constitution is how often do you get sick? Intelligence is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Right? Yes. Wisdom is knowing that tomatoes do not go in a fruit salad. And charisma is how well you can sell tomatoes in a fruit salad.
That's clever. No, my question for you, to interrupt you again, would be if you had to give a charisma stat to me and Aaron right now off the top of your head, what stats would you give us?
These are done randomly by dice.
Oh gosh. I'll roll you guys some D6s. I don't know, kind of off the top of my head, I think you guys are definitely above average. I mean, you have a successful podcast, and
You heard it first.
I think Andrew, you'd have probably maybe a 14. I feel like you have a little bit higher in intimidation. You might be a bit proficient in it. Mostly coming from the perspective of like, you know, when you're on these podcasts and someone doesn't agree with you, it's along the lines of like,
asshole. That's what she's trying to tell you.
Turns into confrontation very quickly.
and so it's like at that point in time when someone doesn't agree with you, you know, you look at them and you're like, this is why you should agree with me. And then it's like, okay, you've just rolled intimidation against them. And then
it is hard to like hold your ground against you.
I think Aaron, I think, honestly, I might give you a 15, but, Aaron, I'd be somewhere between the 14 and 16 range. I think,
Depends on how much he's had to eat that day.
Facts. Today is probably like a 14 kind of day. Not gonna lie.
I
We
think
could
kind
tell.
going off of the podcast and kind of working with you, you're very good at like holding your ground, which is more of like I think that's more along the wisdom side of things, but you're also able to present arguments well and kind of defend yourself, which would be more along the side of persuasion. So probably sitting around the 14 or 15 area for you. That would be my guess.
Kaylee, I think you have maximum wisdom because you were telling us numbers that would make us happy because we would both take it very personally if they were lower scores.
She gave you a range so that neither of us would be higher or lower than the other one.
So, like, Andrew, truthfully, you're probably like a 5. Aaron, you're probably a 4. We would have both cried and left the room. Like, Kaylee's wisdom and ability to read the room is like top tier.
There are quizzes that you can take that will give you like an average, like these are what your scores are. We can put it in the description if you want it.
You can also do like standard array, right? Because that's the first thing I was looking at. And you were like, stop looking at that because that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah, so standard array and point by, standard array is just a set, like 6 numbers that you divvy out to your ability scores versus point by is a number of points. It's kind of a confusing system. You just need to be on for it. You divvy out a certain number of points in each. So ability scores go up from 1 to 20, but for every 10 to 11 is plus 0. 12 to 13 is plus 2. 14 to 15 is plus 3. And then up until you get to 20, and 20 is plus 5.
And what are those pluses for?
That's when you roll the dice. So what was the question? Sorry.
What are the modifier numbers like? How do they apply in the game?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm using the wrong word when I say modifier, but like
No.
this little plus
The little
one.
number or the big number?
The big number.
The big
How does
number.
that apply?
So the big number is so I asked you guys, how would you approach there being a bad guy in the inn brandishing a knife towards somebody? Would you guys draw your swords and go towards him?
Yes.
Yeah. So you would presumably say something to him along the lines of, would you try persuasion or intimidation?
Intimidation.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to try you would try
fear itself.
I am
try the
become
Batman
fear.
route. So I would ask you to roll a 20-sided dice. So it's this pretty little thing right here. And you would roll it. So we would say, okay, so you just got a really good number. That was a 15.
You're damn right.
So what you would do is we'll use Andrew's ability score for charisma. If he were, playing this character, if he was a 15, he'd have a plus 3, I think. No, 2.
It's okay. We all get confused.
2 plus 2. That's what it would be. Sorry. So you would add 2 to your 15. So that means you rolled a 15 plus 2 because of your charisma. That means you have a 17. And so now the enemy would roll his d20, or I, because I'm the DM. And let's assume that he doesn't really have a high charisma. He has a plus 0, rolled a 10. That means he failed. I would actually go with wisdom on this as that's your mental strength to be able to withstand, something like intimidation.
Yeah.
So you got a 17, he got a 10. Well, he just failed. You guys intimidated him. He drops his knife, drops the coin purse, and is like, I don't want any trouble, guy. I don't want to fight any rangers, okay? Just take it.
That's when I backhand him. But now, so the DM's rolling the dice in place of playing, because the DM plays like a variety of roles, all these other characters. One thing I also wanted to ask you about too is advantage. So like if my character is proficient in intimidation and I have advantage, my understanding would be, right, that you would let me roll the d20 twice and pick the higher number.
Yeah. So one term I would like to clarify is proficiency. So there are a number of skills within Dungeons and Dragons. If you look at a character sheet, there's a very large column kind of in the middle that says skills. There are things like acrobatics, animal handling, arcana. There's also persuasion and intimidation. When you're proficient with something, as you level up in the game, you have what's called a proficiency bonus. And that just means like that's your natural or trained adeptness with certain skills. So when we say that you're proficient in intimidation, you get to add that modifier, that number, to
your roll.
On top of your ability score modifier. So at level 6, which you guys are playing in the campaign, you have a +3 proficiency. So +3 plus your +2 in charisma would be +5 overall to your dice roll. So instead of you rolled a 15 instead of a 17, you would actually have a dirty 20 is what we call it. So when you have advantage, that means that you get to roll twice and take the higher number. However, that was a 9, which is not the higher number. So you would still keep the 15. This can, it doesn't always do anything, but it means you have a greater chance of success, either to hit your enemy, succeed on a roll. And generally you get advantage by setting up a situation for yourself and your character that would make the chances higher. So let's say that you have a certain magic item that makes your eyes completely black and it makes kind of smoke come out of somewhere. I don't know, roll off your person, as though like you're a Nazgul or something.
Black smoke.
And so like this is happening. You have a shield that has kind of like a Medusa's head on it that kind of moves as you're trying to, when you try to make an intimidation check. I would say, okay, you have an advantage on this intimidation check because he sees all of these dope things that you guys are wearing that make you additionally scary. So then you would roll twice and take the higher number.
So where do the skill category and then also the proficiency bonus, like how do those interact with each other? Because like if you look here at my intimidation for my character, I have a +3 and then the proficiency is +3. Like how does that?
So is the little bubble filled in?
Yeah.
So if the number for the skill is equal to your proficiency bonus, that means you don't have a plus number from your ability score in that skill. So certain skills are certain abilities. Like acrobatics is obviously dexterity versus athletics is obviously strength. Persuasion and intimidation are charisma. And then you have, I don't think there are none in constitution, but there are a number in intelligence, like investigation and arcana. So let's say that you're looking at...
I have a 7 in investigation.
So that means that you have a +4 in intelligence, which means you either have an 18 or a 19, big number.
Yeah.
So the way that proficiency interacts with that is investigation automatically, because it's an intelligence-based skill, you add your intelligence score to it. And because you have that little black bubble filled in, that means you're really, really good at investigation. So you add that +3, the proficiency bonus, to the +4, making it +7.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's definitely
a lot. Like going over the character sheets and like teaching it and walking through everything. It's a really long process. We learned that when we took 6 hours to do it.
Yeah. So like not only did we play the game for 6 hours, but we also had a Zoom call with all of us that took 6 hours. And then we had an in-person meeting that also took 6 hours. So altogether of the whole cast and crew, if you will, hanging out, learning and playing this game, we're so far 18 hours in.
Yeah. I'd say like probably the biggest thing to scare away new players would be like a time commitment and like maybe not as much an understanding of what the game entails. Because two things I tell people is like the time commitment is you get out of it what you put into it. If you don't put in the time that we put in, you might not be as prepared to play the game and it might come off a little wonky. So it's okay if you don't, just have fun. And then the same thing applies to the other thing that I was discussing, which is like, I think a lot of people have the misconception that like you have to show up to a D&D game like in robes and do a voice and like you have to like bring a scepter. Like you can just show up in your clothes. You can use your normal voice if you want to, and like you can just have a good time. To both of those things, I would say prioritize having fun.
I can guarantee I've never played in a game where someone has shown up in a hat and a robe, and I've been playing for a very, very long time. Not that it's a bad thing. Like it can be really fun to dress up in that way because it's like playing dress up. It's Halloween, but for free.
Yeah, people hear role playing, and I think a lot of people.
They're like,
have a misconception.
That's so weird, but it's like, no, it's like playing make believer. It's being an actor on a set.
You can still be yourself. It's just how you respond to certain scenarios. You want to act as if your character was there.
Yeah,
you don't have to physically be your character. You don't have to, like you said, you don't have to change your voice. You don't have to dress like them or anything like that.
I in the campaign I've referenced a few times, like so many, like most of us do accents, but then, you know, there's one of us who he just kind of speaks in his normal language or his normal like accent. But you know, it can be a lot of fun and it can be incredibly funny to do an accent. Especially as a DM, you know, when you're playing all these different characters, sometimes the easiest way to differentiate for you guys who you're talking to is by doing different accents.
Which you're very good at, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Talent.
I cannot for the life of me, though, get an Australian accent down. I've tried and tried and
Shrimp
tried.
on the bobby. Nailed it. I feel like I only ever so slightly changed my voice, and then I feel like the rest of us either did the same or didn't change our voice at all. So we just had fun.
Yeah, and it's perfectly fine to play that way. Like there's never an expectation that you know you do role play as seriously as somebody else does. It's whatever. It's how far you're comfortable to go. Is like that's literally all that's expected.
For my character, he's kind of stern and kind of knows like his mission, his goal. So like I just talked in my stern voice, I didn't change necessarily how I was talking. I was just trying to be direct and, sound like quote unquote tough, as this character would be putting on that persona,
Yeah.
The next thing I want to get into, Kaylee, is kind of how you structured our campaign and what flavoring is and how you're able to really adapt how you play Dungeons and Dragons to fit your group the best.
Yeah, for sure. So with this campaign, especially kind of taking into consideration that, you guys talk a lot about, Marvel and DC. I mean, you have Batman and Spider-Man right there. I wanted to I wanted to translate, the fantasy world of D&D and all the rules and everything into a more modern setting. So I kind of to do this, I kind of took, inspiration from there's another tabletop RPG called Cyberpunk Red. The video game was kind of based around that world. And there's a lot of, electronic stuff in that world. And so I kind of meshed some of the ideas and creative side of that to the D&D mechanics to adapt that into Marvel and DC. And the way that, the plot was kind of that I wrote it out made it available for me to just take D&D creatures and concepts like fantasy style and just put them in the real world as these things are aliens type of deal.
Yeah, the way we set up our characters and stuff was you asked us to just think of the character and its powers and abilities that you wanted to have if you were that superhero.
Yeah.
And then you helped us transition those powers and abilities into different spells and gadgets and stuff that we can use that are already within the mechanics of D&D.
Yeah, exactly. So it was because in Marvel and DC, there's only so much magic and it's really only in the way of the sorcerers and Sorcerer Supreme. Yeah. So it was translating the fantastical elements into science and physics and real world type of stuff that you would see in a comic versus in a fantasy book type of deal.
Yeah, a real easy example of this is my character has a suit and he has lasers, kind of like Buzz Lightyear or something on his wrist. And you said that there's this gadget, but it's more of a gun in a holster. And I was like, well, he has it on his wrist, so he can kind of use it whenever. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And you made the adjustment,
Yeah.
Based off of what I wanted for the character.
Yeah. And a lot of it comes down to, a DM's willingness to kind of step a little bit away from the rules and do what's called homebrew and to allow stuff like that to be able to, happen. Not every DM allows that much leeway, but to make, to transition D&D into a modern setting, there was a lot of that had to happen. And it was a lot of fun working with you guys to figure that out and make characters in, situations that fit in the real world sense with the characters that you made.
Yeah. Also, we're within the world of the Marvel universe and the DC universe. So like those characters from those universes are there, you know. So like I know Andrew's character has like connections with Bruce Wayne, you know, like that's like an aspect of the story that was a lot of fun to play with, you know. It was like we were actually a part of the MCU or something, you know.
So like one thing we actually didn't talk about yet with the character sheets that connects to this is spells. So how did that work for you in your mind as the DM when you're flavoring this world to Marvel and DC? And like my character, for example, Plasma, has superpowers that let him control, manipulate his own blood and create a sword. Like, how did that work? How did you know what spells to pull from D&D canon to like fit to those characters?
So Aaron kind of said a word earlier, flavoring. So it's essentially when you take a concept or an idea that's mechanically like in D&D, but you want it to be a little bit different to fit an idea that you have. So with spells, you know, for example, Flashfire, he wanted to obviously have fire powers. So he took a certain class, I think it was Sorcerer, and as I said before, there are a bizarre number of things that you just kind of remember off the top of your head. For me, as well as many other players, it's spells. So there are certain levels of spells and everything, and it was picking out all of basically the flame style spells, AoE, which is area of effect spells, certain like specific target spells, like the free, easy to cast stuff, and then translating that was just like, yeah, okay, so this character has the ability to create and manipulate fire like a firebender. Versus, do you spellcast? You spellcast. Do both of you
I have
spellcast?
spellcast.
Yeah, we both have spells. I don't have any cantrips, but I have level 1 and level 2 spells.
Right. So like, for you, it was, kind of you're imbued with kind of a you know, whatever, a cosmic power or something that you know, comes from wherever it did in your backstory, and you're able to draw. You're able to draw from that, you know, like a well within you. And then with, you know, turning your ability into manipulating your blood, it was as easy as, well, you already have a capped number of times that you can use that ability.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, okay, so you use your own blood. That was part of your backstory where, you know, you can only use so much because, you know, you only got so much blood in your body.
Yeah, to be clear to listeners, my actual character from D&D would be considered a paladin, like a level 6 paladin, who would get their powers right from their like oath, and they're very religious characters. But Kaylee flavoring everything over just kind of like ties to my character's backstory, which is like growing up with bloodborne illness and then an attempted cure that like a lab accident results in powers where you can manipulate blood. So it's two very different things, but you just kind of like, it's like you take the lines and you like force them to line up over each other, and you like, whatever doesn't fit, you like sandwich in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
have
like,
two paint colors next to each other and take the brush back and forth, back and forth.
so your sacred oath is oath of devotion. So presumably you took that because of, you know, the person and the stuff that went down in your backstory, right?
Yeah.
So it was easily like Paladin is probably one of the easier ones to transfer over because you got your powers from something happened, and now you have a goal because of that thing that happened.
And you can find a reason for everything. If you just use a little bit of imagination, you can find a reason for anything to line up. I mean, looking at my traits, I have immunity to disease. Like, that's because of the cure that gave me a power over my own blood. You know, in my mind, I'm like, all right, I have manipulation over my own body. I'm immune to disease. Like, you can do that 10 different ways with all these things in here.
Yeah, exactly. And like with Aaron's character, your spellcasting is tech-based. Like all of the magic that comes out of you is just some kind of technological thing messing with, maybe there's a well of magic or energy that it uses to transfer into elemental energy, or kind of, you know, radiant and necrotic damage is... those are types of damages in D&D, and basically it's just corrupting or holyifying the damage or the energy or something. So it was taking ideas of, okay, what are the aspects of each of your guys' characters, and then giving you, you know, the opportunity to say, okay, how would you go about, or how would your character go about using these types of abilities, and then going from there.
Yeah, definitely. Like this this is something I was super excited about. And if you're listening, I definitely recommend checking out our campaign. It's going to be coming out after this video, so keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming out eventually. Aaron's already hard at work editing it, and you'll get to see the characters we've mentioned, their backstories, their like all fleshed out, their decision making. Get to see the campaign that Kaylee designed. Get to see her do cool voices. Although I did think you made a mistake with one of the characters. You called Corey's character Flashfire when I think he did officially change it to Deadweight partway through the story. Deadweight or Trashfire? I think he was.
It was an Easter egg. What's going to happen in our campaign? But yeah, to kind of piggyback off of you there, Andrew, like the first episode's 3 hours long. That was from our first day of filming. This next one that we're filming this weekend is probably going to be about the same. So odds are we'll split this up into a 2-part series, and we're trying to like increase the production value a little bit and kind of treat it like a documentary or something. We're trying to add in a little bit more flavor in terms of the viewing experience, you know, kind of like Kaylee's bringing to the game. We're trying to bring a flavor into the edit, into the experience of watching our campaign.
We're like Baskin Robbins. We're bringing all the flavors, baby.
That's right. So yeah, I'm very excited to see how we like kind of tie it all together. We got some, obviously like our gameplay, but then we have like some green screen work that we're incorporating in. So like hopefully the production value is like there and it's fun and maybe a unique way of how you can experience and watch other people playing D&D. That kind of brings me into my next question, Kaylee, is like, what was it like being a DM, knowing that this is more of a production, knowing that you're on camera, knowing that we have time constraints, recording limits, microphones, we have a bunch of people, but like we can't cut necessarily. We want to like keep the flow going. Like, how was that experience? Because I don't think you've ever done this on camera before as a DM. So like, what was that like for you?
It definitely changes the way that you go. I mean, like every kind of style and fashion that I go about DMing for anything else, one shots and campaigns, is complete difference from that to this, in the sense that, like, you know, for a one shot, I know that I have, you know, 6 to 8 hours maximum for us to be able to go through stuff. There are like there's more in the way of like levels of you know, you start up here, then you get to level 2, then you get to level 3, and the boss is down there. Yeah. Versus, so they're kind of like they're pausing points of like progression kind of thing. So like in a video game, when you get from one area to the next area, you can checkpoint, save it. Versus like for this one, it was about, okay, I need to introduce everybody and then make that, there can't be a pause there. I mean, there can be like a small one, but then you guys need to get to your next destination where you can, you know, get together a little bit, create a plan, and then get to level 2. So there's a little bit of a pause in there, but at the same time, it doesn't stop moving. While it also kind of pauses here and there for, you know, production's sake. Then you get to level 2, and each of these have to be really short, but each level kind of has an amount of combat or interaction with it. And then once you guys clear level 2, who knows what you'll find on level 3.
Ominous.
So then it's kind of you don't stop moving really, at least from level 2 to level 3, versus when I normally DM, excluding campaign style, it's always, you know, there's like a door, okay, Skyrim, quick save, go, kind of a thing. So and then, you know, there's considering, oh, I am on camera, I have to be very, you know, eloquent, I don't want to stumble over my words, I want to make sure that I get the story across well, not just for the table, but for the viewers. And I want to, you know, keep y'all are all new, so I want to make sure that I keep things going really smoothly, because I also want it to watch well.
Yeah, there's a performance aspect that goes into it. Like, we're not just here playing a game, but we're also trying to entertain.
Exactly.
More than just ourselves.
It adds a little bit more pressure to being a newbie into this D&D world. So like, if you're looking to get into this, like, odds are your first time won't be on camera. So like, it'll be a little bit easier than it was for us to come into this world. Because for me anyways, I was like, not only worrying about the game, but I was worrying about the production of the game, you know, like the lights, the microphones, you know, like how we're going to edit it all together, like
Hitting the record button on each camera for the audio.
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
computer.
Exactly. So like there's a lot that went into the production side to elevate the viewer experience. How was it for you, Andrew, knowing that like we're playing this new game, but then we're also performing at the same time?
I think that it was definitely scary going in because I felt like intimidated or nervous to do a voice. I thought it would be a lot of fun, but I also like don't want to sound foolish, like maybe fall out of character or do a voice that sounds too silly. So I think that's like an inherent fear a lot of people have about the game is like, if I role play, like, am I going to fall flat on my face? I mean, we have a good supportive group of friends here. And if it was like just us and not going on the internet, I think I would have felt differently. But I think like we've been talking about is a very different feeling being recorded. So that like definitely factored into my thought process going into it, but it was a lot of fun once the ball gets rolling. And I feel like I definitely like would be inclined to only get more into it from here. But what about you?
Yeah, so the whole time, like it was hard to separate like the gameplay to the production side of things, you know, because I'm like producing this show and everyone else is kind of playing their characters, you know, like Kaylee's worrying about the story. She has that role. She's trying to direct us all. And then above that, I'm trying to direct the production. So I'm like worried about two things at once. And then I'm very aware that we're on camera, you know, like you said. So like when it was my turn for the first time, I remember kind of feeling a little overwhelmed because I had so many options of spells and different attacks and stuff. And there's definitely like a little bit of pause, you know, of me trying to figure out like, I don't know, what can I do? Like, and it's kind of like, well, it's fine. Just play, you know, like ask like, hey, I want to do this. And then Kaylee, our DM, will help me figure out how to do that.
I was very excited to play when I rolled in first in the initiative order for our first like combat experience, and I was like so excited and ready to move. I was like, all right, I want to run here and I want to like get into the fight. I want to take out my sword. And so I really enjoyed it once I started playing a lot.
You know, the production aspect for me was a lot of fun, you know, like all the green screen work that we did, you know, like Kaylee recorded a few like narration points to kind of help progress the story that like we didn't necessarily see as we were playing the game that I think will be like cool to kind of insert throughout. So yeah, it was a lot of fun making this and playing the game. And I feel more confident going into the second half this weekend, you know, of already playing once, kind of knowing how the production side of things were going to go. Like now I'm just even more excited to kind of finish our campaign going into this level 3, this like bigger battle, you know, like I'm very excited for that.
Who knows what you're going to find?
I know.
You do.
You do. Tell us. Tell us something that could make Trash Fire look worse.
You know, you could, you know, cast Fireball in here, cause the entire warehouse to go up in flames, alerting everybody in level 3, you know.
That sounds like him.
Yeah.
Probably do no damage at the same time somehow.
Or if you guys go into like a small space, you're fighting people. He's like, okay,
Oh my
Fireball.
God, he's gonna let us.
And
all
I'm like, you know, all your allies are there. Yeah, that's fine. And then, and you know, the cherry on top would be all your enemies make this saving throw, but none of you do.
Exactly. We all just die.
Incinerated. He's just standing there like,
We'll all just sit there and pout while
It's like
Crash Fire finishes
like
the
in
game.
Bug's Life. Die, 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 and all the ants are falling over. Us, of course, being the ants.
I mean, it'd be great. You guys have a lot of, you know, choices ahead of you. There's never a shortage of choices to make in D&D. It's like real life, you know. Are you going to let the intrusive thoughts win? You should, but are you?
Yeah. Kind of the wrap up this episode, and we've touched on it a little bit, but what are some other like resources out there that people can look into to learn more and get more into this game, like how to play, but then also other creators that are doing similar things that we're doing that we're getting inspiration from, that people can go and watch them play and all that stuff?
Yeah. So, as Aaron said, and I kind of alluded to this for myself earlier, the easiest way to learn how to play is to watch other people play. I mean, it's just the amount of information that you consciously and subconsciously begin to retain when you watch someone else do something is astounding, especially once you realize it as you're sitting at the table looking at the dice and being like, oh, right, I remember that they said something about that. This is what they did when they did it.
So you can watch Critical Role, like we said, Dimension 20, or just a short time from now, you'll be able to watch Backseat Directing's foray into the world of Dungeons and Dragons.
There are a lot of resources, a lot of campaigns, a lot of podcasts for D&D, especially this one. This one's the best one in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
Obviously. Avi.
So that would be like my number one recommendation to learning the game. But on top of that, kind of as we pointed out earlier, Player's Handbook is the easiest.
It's the D&D Bible.
Physical force. It's the D&D Bible. Learning from the Player's Handbook if you want to read through it.
Preach it.
Or you can use D&D Beyond.
It's an awesome DM. She reigns.
D&D Beyond is a great resource to learn how to make simple characters. These days they have pre-made characters that you can reference and just use all the stuff that's already on there. So you don't have to worry about, all 50 steps to getting to a character.
Making a character can be very complicated. I'll forewarn people that. So a pre-made character can definitely be a good entry into a first time playing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then you can also buy like packages, like intro starter packages. The one I looked up online that I see heavily recommended was, we were talking about before, the Minds of Fandelver. Comes with like a few little things for your set. Comes with
it comes with
guide.
dice, and it comes with a pre-made module for you or a DM, even a new DM to be able to run. It comes with pre-made character sheets for you with multiple classes, not all of them because no overwhelmingness, but a number of pre-made characters and a number of classes that you can learn to play. There's a huge difference between learning to play a casting class versus a completely melee class. I mean, they play differently. It's like if anybody's played, like Skyrim, it's the difference between learning to use a bow from beginning to end versus using a greatsword or a shield from beginning to end, kind of a thing.
I think the character you pick can be a really big difference maker too. Like, what are some of the easy characters to pick? I felt like a paladin for me seemed not difficult.
Paladins, they can generally be pretty easy just because they're arguably one of the better classes.
Andrew needs easy. Like when things get a little too complicated, he gets a little frustrated and confused.
That's why I dealt the most damage, is because I had the best character class.
And then I would also recommend like a fighter. A fighter is probably one of the most basic classes that you can play. A rogue is also super easy because it's the same three things every time. I hide in the shadows, I go out, I stab, I go back in the shadows.
And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not fun to play.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean it won't be complicated or that it won't, like when you get to a higher level, or that it won't contribute a lot, because certain classes contribute more in mechanical ways versus other classes contribute more in the role player story aspect.
Something I had to keep reminding myself of is like, it's okay for your character not to be strong in everything and to like have weaknesses and have faults, and like, that's okay because you're a part of a cast. You're all, if you all are just like these macho men that are like super strong and all have the same ability, like it's not very dynamic. It's not a fun story. As if people had flaws and people complemented each other's powers and stuff like that.
And it can be fun and incredibly funny to see failure, happen in a game.
As we saw.
Like Critical Role is known for their just complete inability to get through a door. Like their biggest enemy is the joke among Critical Role fans is their biggest enemy is a door. Every single time it's a door, whatever kind of door it is. It can be the most simple wooden locked door. They can't get through it.
Facing a level 30 godly door.
So like you guys, your whole thing as of right now with a fire Psycho Man is wood. Like, figuring out, how to get through scenarios where you can't use all of your abilities and where you are weaker, so it's fun discovering that. And, pre-made character sheets, they have all of those aspects for you as well.
Yeah.
And make it really easy to learn the game. So the modules, the podcasts, and then as you get going, as I mentioned right at the very beginning, you can continue to play in modules, or you can play in homebrew games, and it doesn't detract from the game, whichever you choose to do or whichever you have the opportunity to do. Everything adds to it because it's new to you every time.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Andrew and I's characters are kind of opposites of each other in terms of ability. Like Andrew, you're like on the ground, up close, really strong. And then my character, Laserbeam, is a little more distance. Like he can fly, he has long range weapons, he doesn't get as close, and like it's cool to see like how you're playing your character versus like what my character's abilities are. Like if we were the same thing, like it wouldn't be as fun, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Like there are those of us in the group that are like in the air and on top of buildings, and then those of us that are like touching the monster like 5 feet away.
Yeah, and then
or getting eaten by the monster
in some cases.
And then there's recurve,
we'll let you figure out
5 miles away.
Yeah.
Firing a heat-seeking arrow.
Another show or I guess series or episodes that I watched a few of that got me excited about playing once we figured out that we were going to be doing this is the Stranger Things cast has played a bunch of different D&D games. And for me, it was really cool because I knew all the people who were playing, and then they were relatively new to it as well. So like they were kind of stumbling over themselves. They were kind of asking the DM like, hey, like, how do I do something along these lines? Like that's what I would like to do. And the DM tries to help them. So it was cool seeing them like be kind of beginners, but also relatable people that I've recognized,
Yeah. The cool thing about D&D is that like everybody plays it. Like Vin Diesel, the Russo brothers,
Joe Manganiello is super famous for playing it.
Yes, and like the Game of Thrones producers, writers, directors, they play it. Like
Aaron Tate, Andrew D. Christina, like
all the greats.
Yeah.
Chris Pine, the cast of that D&D movie, they played a huge game of Dungeons and Dragons with like all of them. There isn't a cap on how many players you can play with.
There's a video online of behind the scenes of Joe Manganiello has this like specially made table for D&D. He has like a dungeon in his house. That's Sofia Vergara's husband, and he invites like celebrities over for like big campaigns of D&D. It
sounds so much fun.
It's like an elite D&D game like to be a part of.
So Kaylee, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I want you to briefly summarize what our campaign is about as if it's a short little trailer.
Okay. So the world of Marvel and the world of DC. Two very, very different places with very, very different people. Heroes, villains, anti-heroes, and anti-villains alike. Of many different power variants. You have Captain Marvel, who basically holds like the universe in the palm of her hand, versus like Green Arrow, who shoots a bow and arrow in the DC universe. And these worlds, they've collided a few times in the past, but never in a way that's lasted. Recently, something's happened. Something's been happening. And now this plot is coming to the forefront of the lives of, what, 5? Mm-hmm. 5 guys. It's the pizza place.
Burger place. Put some respect on Five Guys' name.
Sorry. Of 5 heroes. Heroes, anti-heroes, anti-villains. Yeah, it's a little up in the air.
Murky waters.
And suddenly, the worlds of Marvel and DC find themselves intertwined in a plot that we have yet to fully realize. And that's what these heroes, anti-heroes, anti-villains, it's up in the air, are going to uncover.
Pen pending.
Dun, dun, dun. Very cool.
Yeah, so my character, Plasma, along with our friend Justin's character, Voidwalker, our friend Zach's character, Recurve, are from the DC universe, and our fate's kind of being thrust upon meeting Aaron's character, Laserbeam, and Corey's character, Deadweight.
Flashfire.
Flashfire.
So like we're getting to, which is really cool about starting a new campaign, is like watching Critical Role. They're in their first episode, they've been campaigning together, so it's like they have a vibe, they click, they know what's going on. Our characters are literally meeting each other. So like getting like the strife there, I feel like has been really fun. Because we have no clue what the other person's gonna do.
Yeah.
Because not only do we not know their character in the game, but like we have very little understanding of what they can actually do with their character sheet, like, because we're so new.
Yeah.
You guys are learning each other and yourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. Kaylee, thanks so much for coming on the show yet again and explaining how D&D works. We were very excited for our campaign. Again, that will be coming out in the next few weeks. You were also on our Barbie episode, which I believe is 108. So the audience can check that out as well. And thank you everyone for watching and for the support. We're almost at 500 subscribers on YouTube. Maybe by the time this is posted, we've already reached there. But just head over to our YouTube page and hit subscribe to bring us over that 500 mark before our 1-year anniversary, which is August 15th. Again, we appreciate the support. We post full episodes every Monday and Thursday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else you get your podcasts. We're posting every single day on social media. Thanks so much. And
That's a wrap.